mountain on the east of Bethel, and pitched his tent, having Bethel on the west and Hai on the east. And there he builded an altar unto the Lord, and called upon the name of the Lord. And Abram journeyed, going on still toward the south. And there was a famine in the land, and Abram went down into Egypt to sojourn there, for the famine was grievous in the land. And it came to pass, when he was come near to enter into Egypt, that he said unto Sarai his wife, Behold now, I know that thou art a fair woman to look upon. Therefore it shall come to pass, when the Egyptians shall see thee, that they shall say, This is his wife, and they will kill me, but they will save thee alive. Say, I pray thee, thou art my sister, that it may be well with me for thy sake, and my soul shall live because of thee. And it came to pass that when Abram was come into Egypt, the Egyptians beheld the woman, that she was very fair. The princes also of Pharaoh saw her, and commended her before Pharaoh, and the woman was taken into Pharaoh's house. And he entreated Abram well for her sake. And he had sheep and oxen, and he-asses, and men servants, and maid servants, and she-asses, and camels. And the Lord plagued Pharaoh and his house with great plagues, because of Sarai, Abram's wife. And Pharaoh called Abram and said, What is this that thou hast done unto me? Why didst thou not tell me that she was thy wife? Why saidst thou, She is my sister? So I might have taken her to me to wife. Now therefore, behold thy wife, take her and go thy way. And Pharaoh commanded his men concerning him, and they sent him away, and his wife, and all that he had. Chapter 13. And Abram went up out of Egypt, he and his wife, and all that he had, and Lot with him, into the south. And Abram was very rich in cattle, in silver, and in gold. And he went on his journeys from the south, even to Bethel, unto the place where his tent had been at the beginning, between Bethel and Hai, unto the place of the altar, which he had made there at the first. And there Abram called on the name of the Lord. And Lot also, which went with Abram, had flocks and herds and tents. And the land was not able to bear them, that they might dwell together, for their substance was great, so that they could not dwell together. And there was a strife between the herdmen of Abram's cattle and the herdmen of Lot's cattle. And the Canaanite and the Perizzite dwelled then in the land. And Abram said unto Lot, Let there be no strife, I pray thee, between me and thee, and between my herdmen and thy herdmen, for we be brethren. Is not the whole land before thee? Separate thyself, I pray thee, from me. If thou wilt take the left hand, then I will go to the right, or if thou depart to the right hand, then I will go to the left. And Lot lifted up his eyes, and beheld all the plain of Jordan, that it was well watered everywhere, before the Lord destroyed Sodom and Gomorrah, even as the garden of the Lord, like the land of Egypt, as thou comest unto Zoar. Then Lot chose him all the plain of Jordan, and Lot journeyed east, and they separated themselves the one from the other. Abram dwelled in the land of Canaan, and Lot dwelled in the cities of the plain, and pitched his tent toward Sodom. But the men of Sodom were wicked and sinners before the Lord exceedingly. And the Lord said unto Abram, after that Lot was separated from him, Lift up now thine eyes, and look from the place where thou art, northward, and southward, and eastward, and westward. For all the land which thou seest, to thee will I give it, and to thy seed forever. And I will make thy seed as the dust of the earth, so that if a man can number the dust of the earth, then shall thy seed also be numbered. Arise, walk through the land in the length of it and in the breadth of it, for I will give it unto thee. Then Abram removed his tent, and came and dwelt in the plain of Mamre, which is in Hebron, and built there an altar unto the Lord. Chapter 14. And it came to pass in the days of Amraphel, king of Shinar, Arioch, king of Elasar, Kedorlaomer, king of Elam, and Tidal, king of nations, that these made war with Bera, king of Sodom, and with Birsha, king of Gomorrah, Shinab, king of Admah, and Shemeba, king of Zeboim, and the king of Bela, which is Zoar. All these were joined together in the vale of Siddim, which is the Salt Sea. 12 years they served Kedorlaomer, and in the 13th year they rebelled. And in the 14th year came Kedorlaomer and the kings that were with him, and smote the Rephaims in Ashtaroth Karnaim, and the Zuzims in Ham, and the Emims in Shavi Kiriathaim, and the Horites in their Mount Seir unto El Paran, which is by the wilderness. And they returned and came to En-Mishpat, which is Kadesh, and smote all the country of the Amalekites, and also the Amorites that dwelt in Hazez on Tamar. And there went out the king of Sodom, and the king of Gomorrah, and the king of Admah, and the king of Zeboim, and the king of Bela, the same as Zoar. And they joined battle with them in the vale of Siddim, with Kedorlaomer, the king of Elam, and with Tidal, king of nations, and with Amraphel, king of Shinar, and Arioch, king of Elasa, 4 kings with fire. And the vale of Siddim was full of slime pits, and the kings of Sodom and Gomorrah fled and fell there, and they that remained fled to the mountain. And they took all the goods of Sodom and Gomorrah and all their victuals, and went their way. And they took Lot, Abram's brother's son, who dwelt in Sodom, and his goods, and departed. And there came one that had escaped, and told Abram the Hebrew, for he dwelt in the plain of Mamre the Amorite, brother of Eshcol, and brother of Aner, and these were confederate with Abram. And when Abram heard that his brother was taken captive, he armed his trained servants, born in his own house, 318, and pursued them unto Dan. And he divided himself against them, he and his servants, by night, and smote them, and pursued them unto Hobah, which is on the left hand of Damascus. And he brought back all the goods, and also brought again his brother Lot, and his goods, and the women also, and the people. And the king of Sodom went out to meet him after his return from the slaughter of Kedorlaomer, and of the kings that were with him at the valley of Shavi, which is the king's dale. And Melchizedek, king of Salem, brought forth bread and wine, and he was the priest of the Most High God. And he blessed him, and said, Blessed be Abram of the Most High God, possessor of heaven and earth. And blessed be the Most High God, which hath delivered thine enemies into thy hand. And he gave him tithes of all. And the king of Sodom said unto Abram, Give me the persons, and take the goods to thyself. And Abram said to the king of Sodom, I have lifted up mine hand unto the Lord, the Most High God, the possessor of heaven and earth, that I will not take from a thread even to a shoe latchet, and that I will not take anything that is thine, lest thou shouldest say, I have made Abram rich. Save only that which the young men have eaten, and the portion of the men which went with me, Aner, Eshcol, and Mamre. Let them take their portion. Chapter 15. After these things, the word of the Lord came unto Abram in a vision, saying, Fear not, Abram, I am thy shield, and thy exceeding great reward. And Abram said, Lord God, what wilt thou give me, seeing I go childless, and the steward of my house is this Eliezer of Damascus? And Abram said, Behold, to me thou hast given no seed, and lo, one born in my house is mine heir. And behold, the word of the Lord came unto him, saying, This shall not be thine heir, but he that shall come forth out of thine own bowels shall be thine heir. And he brought him forth abroad, and said, Look now toward heaven, and tell the stars, if thou be able to number them. And he said unto him, So shall thy seed be. And he believed in the Lord, and he counted it to him for righteousness. And he said unto him, I am the Lord that brought thee out of Ur of the Chaldees to give thee this land to inherit it. And he said, Lord God, whereby shall I know that I shall inherit it? And he said unto him, Take me an heifer of 3 years old, and a she-goat of 3 years old, and a ram of 3 years old, and a turtle dove, and a young pigeon. And he took unto him all these, and divided them in the midst, and laid each piece one against another, but the birds divided he not. And when the fowls came down upon the carcasses, Abram drove them away. And when the sun was going down, a deep sleep fell upon Abram. And lo, an horror of great darkness fell upon him. And he said unto Abram, Know of a surety that thy seed shall be a stranger in a land that is not theirs, and shall serve them, and they shall afflict them 400 years. And also that nation whom they shall serve will I judge, and afterward shall they come out with great substance. And thou shalt go to thy fathers in peace, thou shalt be buried in a good old age. But in the 4th generation they shall come hither again, for the iniquity of the Amorites is not yet full. And it came to pass that when the sun went down and it was dark, behold, a smoking furnace, and a burning lamp that passed between those pieces. In the same day, the Lord made a covenant with Abram, saying, Unto thy seed have I given this land, from the river of Egypt unto the great river, the river Euphrates. The Kenites, and the Kenizzites, and the Cadmonites, and the Hittites, and the Perizzites, and the Rephaims, and the Amorites, and the Canaanites, and the Girgashites, and the Jebusites. Chapter 16. Now Sarai, Abram's wife, bare him no children, and she had an handmaid, an Egyptian, whose name was Hagar. And Sarai said unto Abram, Behold, now the Lord hath restrained me from bearing. I pray thee, go in unto my maid. It may be that I may obtain children by her. And Abram hearkened to the voice of Sarai. And Sarai, Abram's wife, took Hagar, her maid, the Egyptian, after Abram had dwelt 10 years in the land of Canaan, and gave her to her husband Abram to be his wife. And he went in unto Hagar, and she conceived. And when she saw that she had conceived, her mistress was despised in her eyes. And Sarai said unto Abram, My wrong be upon thee. I have given my maid into thy bosom. And when she saw that she had conceived, I was despised in her eyes. The Lord judge between me and thee. But Abram said unto Sarai, Behold, thy maid is in thy hand. Do to her as it pleaseth thee. And when Sarai dealt hardly with her, she fled from her face. And the angel of the Lord found her by a fountain of water in the wilderness, by the fountain in the way to Shur. And he said, Hagar, Sarai's maid, whence camest thou, and whither wilt thou go? And she said, I flee from the face of my mistress Sarai. And the angel of the Lord said unto her, Return to thy mistress, and submit thyself under her hands. And the angel of the Lord said unto her, I will multiply thy seed exceedingly, that it shall not be numbered for multitude. And the angel of the Lord said unto her, Behold, thou art with child, and shalt bear a son, and shalt call his name Ishmael, because the Lord hath heard thy affliction. And he will be a wild man. His hand will be against every man, and every man's hand against him. And he shall dwell in the presence of all his brethren. And she called the name of the Lord that spake unto her, Thou, God, seest me. For she said, Have I also here looked after him that seeth me? Wherefore the well was called Beer-lahai-roi. Behold, it is between Kadesh and Bered. And Hagar bare Abram a son, and Abram called his son's name, which Hagar bare, Ishmael. And Abram was 86 years old when Hagar bare Ishmael to Abram. Chapter 17. And when Abram was 90 years old and 9, the Lord appeared to Abram and said unto him, I am the Almighty God. Walk before me, and be thou perfect. And I will make my covenant between me and thee, and will multiply thee exceedingly. And Abram fell on his face, and God talked with him, saying, As for me, behold, my covenant is with thee, and thou shalt be a father of many nations. Neither shall thy name any more be called Abram, but thy name shall be Abraham, for a father of many nations have I made thee. And I will make thee exceeding fruitful, and I will make nations of thee, and kings shall come out of thee. And I will establish my covenant between me and thee and thy seed after thee in their generations for an everlasting covenant, to be a God unto thee and to thy seed after thee. And I will give unto thee and to thy seed after thee the land wherein thou art a stranger, all the land of Canaan, for an everlasting possession. And I will be their God. And God said unto Abraham, Thou shalt keep my covenant, therefore, thou and thy seed after thee in their generations. This is my covenant, which ye shall keep between me and you and thy seed after thee. Every man-child among you shall be circumcised, and ye shall circumcise the flesh of your foreskin, and it shall be a token of the covenant betwixt me and you. And he that is 8 days old shall be circumcised among you, every man-child in your generations. He that is born in the house, or bought with money of any stranger, which is not of thy seed. He that is born in thy house, and he that is bought with thy money, must needs be circumcised. And my covenant shall be in your flesh, for an everlasting covenant. And the uncircumcised man-child whose flesh of his foreskin is not circumcised, that soul shall be cut off from his people. He hath broken my covenant. And God said unto Abraham, As for Sarai thy wife, thou shalt not call her name Sarai, but Sarah shall her name be. And I will bless her, and give thee a son also of her. Yea, I will bless her, and she shall be a mother of nations. Kings of people shall be of her. Then Abraham fell upon his face, and laughed, and said in his heart, Shall a child be born unto him that is 100 years old? And shall Sarah that is 90 years old bear? And Abraham said unto God, Oh, that Ishmael might live before thee. And God said, Sarah thy wife shall bear thee a son indeed, and thou shalt call his name Isaac. And I will establish my covenant with him for an everlasting covenant, and with his seed after him. And as for Ishmael, I have heard thee. Behold, I have blessed him, and will make him fruitful, and will multiply him exceedingly. 12 princes shall he beget, and I will make him a great nation. But my covenant will I establish with Isaac, which Sarah shall bear unto thee at this set time in the next year. And he left off talking with him, and God went up from Abraham. And Abraham took Ishmael his son, and all that were born in his house, and all that were bought with his money, every male among the men of Abraham's house, and circumcised the flesh of their foreskin in the selfsame day, as God had said unto him. And Abram was 90 years old and 9 when he was circumcised in the flesh of his foreskin. And Ishmael his son was 13 years old when he was circumcised in the flesh of his foreskin. In the selfsame day was Abraham circumcised, and Ishmael his son. And all the men of his house, born in the house and bought with money of the stranger, were circumcised with him. Chapter 18. And the Lord appeared unto him in the plains of Mamre, and he sat in the tent door in the heat of the day. And he lifted up his eyes and looked, and lo, 3 men stood by him. And when he saw them, he ran to meet them from the tent door, and bowed himself toward the ground, and said, My Lord, if now I have found favor in thy sight, pass not away, I pray thee, from thy servant. Let a little water, I pray you, be fetched, and wash your feet, and rest yourselves under the tree. And I will fetch a morsel of bread, and comfort ye your hearts. After that ye shall pass on. For therefore are ye come to your servant. And they said, So do as thou hast said. And Abraham hastened into the tent unto Sarah, and said, Make ready quickly 3 measures of fine meal, knead it, and make cakes upon the hearth. And Abraham ran unto the herd, and fetched a calf, tender and good, and gave it unto a young man, and he hasted to dress it. And he took butter and milk, and the calf which he had dressed, and set it before them. And he stood by them under the tree, and they did eat. And they said unto him, Where is Sarah thy wife? And he said, Behold, in the tent. And he said, I will certainly return unto thee according to the time of life. And lo, Sarah thy wife shall have a son. And Sarah heard it in the tent door which was behind him. Now Abraham and Sarah were old and well stricken in age, and it ceased to be with Sarah after the manner of women. Therefore Sarah laughed within herself, saying, After I am waxed old shall I have pleasure, my Lord being old also? And the Lord said unto Abraham, Wherefore did Sarah laugh, saying, Shall I of a surety bear a child which am old? Is anything too hard for the Lord? At the time appointed I will return unto thee according to the time of life, and Sarah shall have a son. Then Sarah denied, saying, I laughed not. She was afraid. And he said, Nay, but thou didst laugh. And the men rose up from thence, and looked toward Sodom. And Abraham went with them to bring them on the way. And the Lord said, Shall I hide from Abraham that thing which I do, seeing that Abraham shall surely become a great and mighty nation, and all the nations of the earth shall be blessed in him? For I know him, that he will command his children and his household after him, and they shall keep the way of the Lord, to do justice and judgment, that the Lord may bring upon Abraham that which he hath spoken of him. And the Lord said, Because the cry of Sodom and Gomorrah is great, and because their sin is very grievous, I will go down now, and see whether they have done altogether according to the cry of it which is come unto me. And if not, I will know. And the men turned their faces from thence and went toward Sodom. But Abraham stood yet before the Lord. And Abraham drew near and said, Wilt thou also destroy the righteous with the wicked? Peradventure there be 50 righteous within the city. Wilt thou also destroy and not spare the place for the 50 righteous that are therein? That be far from thee to do after this manner, to slay the righteous with the wicked, and that the righteous should be as the wicked. That be far from thee. Shall not the judge of all the earth do right? And the Lord said, If I find in Sodom 50 righteous within the city, then I will spare all the place for their sakes. And Abraham answered and said, Behold, now I have taken upon me to speak unto the Lord, which am but dust and ashes. Peradventure there shall lack 5 of the 50 righteous. Wilt thou destroy all the city for lack of 5? And he said, If I find there 40 and 5, I will not destroy it. And he spake unto him yet again and said, Peradventure there shall be 40 found there. And he said, I will not do it for 40's sake. And he said unto him, Oh, let not the Lord be angry, and I will speak. Peradventure there shall 30 be found there. And he said, I will not do it if I find 30 there. And he said, Behold now, I have taken upon me to speak unto the Lord. Peradventure there shall be 20 found there. And he said, I will not destroy it for 20's sake. And he said, Oh, let not the Lord be angry, and I will speak yet but this once. Peradventure 10 shall be found there. And he said, I will not destroy it for 10's sake. And the Lord went his way as soon as he had left communing with Abraham. And Abraham returned unto his place. Chapter 19. And there came 2 angels to Sodom at even, and Lot sat in the gate of Sodom. And Lot, seeing them, rose up to meet them, and he bowed himself with his face toward the ground. And he said, Behold now, my lords, turn in, I pray you, into your servant's house, and tarry all night, and wash your feet, and ye shall rise up early, and go on your ways. And they said, Nay, but we will abide in the street all night. And he pressed upon them greatly, and they turned in unto him, and entered into his house. And he made them a feast, and did bake unleavened bread, and they did eat. But before they lay down, the men of the city, even the men of Sodom, compassed the house round, both old and young, all the people from every quarter. And they called unto Lot, and said unto him, Where are the men which came into thee this night? Bring them out unto us, that we may know them. And Lot went out at the door unto them, and shut the door after him, and said, I pray you, brethren, do not so wickedly. Behold now, I have 2 daughters which have not known man. Let me, I pray you, bring them out unto you, and do ye to them as is good in your eyes. Only unto these men do nothing. For therefore came they under the shadow of my roof. And they said, Stand back. And they said again, This one fellow came in to sojourn, and he will needs be a judge. Now will we deal worse with thee than with them. And they pressed sore upon the man, even Lot, and came near to break the door. But the men put forth their hand, and pulled Lot into the house to them, and shut to the door. And they smote the men that were at the door of the house with blindness, both small and great, so that they wearied themselves to find the door. And the men said unto Lot, Hast thou here any besides? Son-in-law, and thy sons, and thy daughters, and whatsoever thou hast in the city, bring them out of this place. For we will destroy this place, because the cry of them is waxen great before the face of the Lord, and the Lord hath sent us to destroy it. And Lot went out and spake unto his sons-in-law, which married his daughters, and said, Up, get you out of this place, for the Lord will destroy this city. But he seemed as one that mocked unto his sons-in-law. And when the morning arose, then the angels hastened Lot, saying, Arise, take thy wife and thy 2 daughters which are here, lest thou be consumed in the iniquity of the city. And while he lingered, the men laid hold upon his hand, and upon the hand of his wife, and upon the hand of his 2 daughters, the Lord being merciful unto him, and they brought him forth, and set him without the city. And it came to pass, when they had brought them forth abroad, that he said, Escape for thy life, look not behind thee, neither stay thou in all the plain. Escape to the mountain, lest thou be consumed. And Lot said unto them, O not so, my lord. Behold, now thy servant hath found grace in thy sight, and thou hast magnified thy mercy, which thou hast showed unto me in saving my life. And I cannot escape to the mountain, lest some evil take me, and I die. Behold now, this city is near to flee unto, and it is a little one. Oh, let me escape thither. Is it not a little one? And my soul shall live. And he said unto him, See, I have accepted thee concerning this thing also, that I will not overthrow this city, for the which thou hast spoken. Haste thee, escape thither, for I cannot do anything till thou be come thither. Therefore the name of the city was called Zoar. The sun was risen upon the earth when Lot entered into Zoar. Then the Lord rained upon Sodom and upon Gomorrah brimstone and fire from the Lord out of heaven, and he overthrew those cities, and all the plain, and all the inhabitants of the cities, and that which grew upon the ground. But his wife looked back from behind him, and she became a pillar of salt. And Abraham gat up early in the morning to the place where he stood before the Lord, and he looked toward Sodom and Gomorrah, and toward all the land of the plain, and beheld, and lo, the smoke of the country went up as the smoke of a furnace. And it came to pass, when God destroyed the cities of the plain, that God remembered Abraham, and sent Lot out of the midst of the overthrow, when he overthrew the cities in the which Lot dwelt. And Lot went up out of Zoar, and dwelt in the mountain, and his 2 daughters with him, for he feared to dwell in Zoar. And he dwelt in a cave, he and his 2 daughters. And the firstborn said unto the younger, Our father is old, and there is not a man in the earth to come in unto us after the manner of all the earth. Come, let us make our father drink wine, and we will lie with him, that we may preserve seed of our father. And they made their father drink wine that night. And the firstborn went in and lay with her father. And he perceived not when she lay down, nor when she arose. And it came to pass on the morrow, that the firstborn said unto the younger, Behold, I lay yesternight with my father. Let us make him drink wine this night also, and go thou in and lie with him, that we may preserve seed of our father. And they made their father drink wine that night also. And the younger arose and lay with him, and he perceived not when she lay down, nor when she arose. Thus were both the daughters of Lot with child by their father. And the firstborn bare a son, and called his name Moab, the same as the father of the Moabites unto this day. And the younger, she also bare a son, and called his name Ben-Ammon, the same as the father of the children of Ammon unto this day. Chapter 20. And Abraham journeyed from thence toward the south country, and dwelled between Kadesh and Shur, and sojourned in Gerar. And Abraham said of Sarah his wife, She is my sister. And Abimelech king of Gerar sent and took Sarah. But God came to Abimelech in a dream by night, and said to him, Behold, thou art but a dead man, for the woman which thou hast taken, for she is a man's wife. But Abimelech had not come near her, and he said, Lord, wilt thou slay also a righteous nation? Said he not unto me, She is my sister? And she, even she herself, said, He is my brother. In the integrity of my heart and innocency of my hands have I done this. And God said unto him in a dream, Yea, I know that thou didst this in the integrity of thy heart, for I also withheld thee from sinning against me. Therefore suffered I thee not to touch her. Now therefore restore the man his wife, for he is a prophet, and he shall pray for thee, and thou shalt live. And if thou restore her not, know thou that thou shalt surely die, thou and all that are thine. Therefore Abimelech rose early in the morning, and called all his servants, and told all these things in their ears, and the men were sore afraid. Then Abimelech called Abraham, and said unto him, What hast thou done unto us? And what have I offended thee, that thou hast brought on me and on my kingdom a great sin? Thou hast done deeds unto me that ought not to be done. And Abimelech said unto Abraham, What sawest thou, that thou hast done this thing? And Abraham said, Because I thought, surely the fear of God is not in this place, and they will slay me for my wife's sake. And yet indeed she is my sister. She is the daughter of my father, but not the daughter of my mother, and she became my wife. And it came to pass, when God caused me to wander from my father's house, that I said unto her, This is thy kindness which thou shalt show unto me. At every place whither we shall come, say of me, He is my brother. And Abimelech took sheep and oxen and men servants and women servants, and gave them unto Abraham, and restored him Sarah his wife. And Abimelech said, Behold, my land is before thee, dwell where it pleaseth thee. And unto Sarah he said, Behold, I have given thy brother 1,000 pieces of silver. Behold, he is to thee a covering of the eyes, unto all that are with thee, and with all other. Thus she was reproved. So Abraham prayed unto God, and God healed Abimelech and his wife and his maidservants, and they bare children. For the Lord had fast closed up all the wombs of the house of Abimelech because of Sarah, Abraham's wife. Chapter 21. And the Lord visited Sarah as he had said, and the Lord did unto Sarah as he had spoken. For Sarah conceived, and bare Abraham a son in his old age, at the set time of which God had spoken to him. And Abraham called the name of his son that was born unto him, whom Sarah bare to him, Isaac. And Abraham circumcised his son Isaac, being 8 days old, as God had commanded him. And Abraham was 100 years old when his son Isaac was born unto him. And Sarah said, God hath made me to laugh, so that all that hear will laugh with me. And she said, Who would have said unto Abraham that Sarah should have given children suck? For I have borne him a son in his old age. The child grew and was weaned, and Abraham made a great feast the same day that Isaac was weaned. And Sarah saw the son of Hagar the Egyptian, which she had borne unto Abraham, mocking. Wherefore she said unto Abraham, Cast out this bondwoman and her son, for the son of this bondwoman shall not be heir with my son, even with Isaac. And the thing was very grievous in Abraham's sight because of his son. And God said unto Abraham, Let it not be grievous in thy sight because of the lad and because of thy bondwoman. In all that Sarah hath said unto thee, hearken unto her voice. For in Isaac shall thy seed be called. And also of the son of the bondwoman will I make a nation, because he is thy seed. And Abraham rose up early in the morning, and took bread and a bottle of water, and gave it unto Hagar, putting it on her shoulder, and the child, and sent her away. And she departed, and wandered in the wilderness of Beersheba. And the water was spent in the bottle. And she cast the child under one of the shrubs, and she went and sat her down over against him a good way off, as it were a bow shot. For she said, Let me not see the death of the child. And she sat over against him, and lifted up her voice, and wept. And God heard the voice of the lad. And the angel of God called to Hagar out of heaven, and said unto her, What aileth thee, Hagar? Fear not, for God hath heard the voice of the lad where he is. Arise, lift up the lad, and hold him in thine hand, for I will make him a great nation. And God opened her eyes, and she saw a well of water. And she went and filled the bottle with water, and gave the lad drink. And God was with the lad, and he grew and dwelt in the wilderness, and became an archer. And he dwelt in the wilderness of Paran, and his mother took him a wife out of the land of Egypt. And it came to pass at that time that Abimelech and Phicol, the chief captain of his host, spake unto Abraham, saying, God is with thee in all that thou doest. Now therefore swear unto me here by God, that thou wilt not deal falsely with me, nor with my son, nor with my son's son. But according to the kindness that I have done unto thee, thou shalt do unto me, and to the land wherein thou hast sojourned. And Abraham said, I will swear. And Abraham reproved Abimelech because of a well of water which Abimelech's servants had violently taken away. And Abimelech said, I wot not who hath done this thing. Neither didst thou tell me, neither yet heard I of it, but today. And Abraham took sheep and oxen, and gave them unto Abimelech, and both of them made a covenant. And Abraham set 7 ewe lambs of the flock by themselves. And Abimelech said unto Abraham, What mean these 7 ewe lambs which thou hast set by themselves? And he said, For these 7 ewe lambs shalt thou take of my hand, that they may be a witness unto me that I have digged this well. Wherefore he called that place Beersheba, because there they swear both of them. Thus they made a covenant at Beersheba. Then Abimelech rose up, and Phicol, the chief captain of his host, and they returned into the land of the Philistines. And Abraham planted a grove in Beersheba, and called there on the name of the Lord, the everlasting God. And Abraham sojourned in the Philistines' land many days. Chapter 22. And it came to pass after these things that God did tempt Abraham, and said unto him, Abraham. And he said, Behold, here I am. And he said, Take now thy son, thine only son Isaac, whom thou lovest, and get thee into the land of Moriah, and offer him there for a burnt offering upon one of the mountains, which I will tell thee of. And Abraham rose up early in the morning, and saddled his ass, and took 2 of his young men with him, and Isaac his son, and clave the wood for the burnt offering, and rose up, and went unto the place of which God had told him. Then on the 3rd day Abraham lifted up his eyes, and saw the place afar off. And Abraham said unto his young men, Abide ye here with the ass, and I and the lad will go yonder and worship, and come again to you. And Abraham took the wood of the burnt offering, and laid it upon Isaac his son. And he took the fire in his hand and a knife, and they went both of them together. And Isaac spake unto Abraham his father, and said, My father. And he said, Here am I, my son. And he said, Behold the fire and the wood, but where is the lamb for a burnt offering? And Abraham said, My son, God will provide himself a lamb for a burnt offering. So they went both of them together. And they came to the place which God had told him of. And Abraham built an altar there, and laid the wood in order, and bound Isaac his son, and laid him on the altar upon the wood. And Abraham stretched forth his hand, and took the knife to slay his son. And the angel of the Lord called unto him out of heaven, and said, Abraham, Abraham. And he said, Here am I. And he said, Lay not thine hand upon the lad, neither do thou anything unto him. For now I know that thou fearest God, seeing thou hast not withheld thy son, thine only son, from me. And Abraham lifted up his eyes and looked, and behold, behind him a ram caught in a thicket by his horns. And Abraham went and took the ram, and offered him up for a burnt offering in the stead of his son. And Abraham called the name of that place Jehovah-Jireh, as it is said to this day, in the mount of the Lord it shall be seen. And the angel of the Lord called unto Abraham out of heaven the second time, and said, By myself have I sworn, saith the Lord, for because thou hast done this thing, and hast not withheld thy son, thine only son, that in blessing I will bless thee, and in multiplying I will multiply thy seed as the stars of the heaven, and as the sand which is upon the seashore, and thy seed shall possess the gate of his enemies. And in thy seed shall all the nations of the earth be blessed, because thou hast obeyed my voice. So Abraham returned unto his young men, and they rose up and went together to Beersheba. And Abraham dwelt at Beersheba. And it came to pass after these things, that it was told Abraham, saying, Behold, Milcah, she hath also borne children unto thy brother Nahor, Huz his firstborn, and Buz his brother, and Kemuel the father of Aram, and Kesed, and Hazo, and Pildash, and Jidlaph, and Bethuel. And Bethuel begat Rebekah. These 8 Milcah did bear to Nahor, Abraham's brother. And his concubine, whose name was Rumah, she bare also Tebah, and Gaham, and Bahash, and Maacah. Chapter 23. And Sarah was 127 years old. These were the years of the life of Sarah. And Sarah died in Kirjath-arba, the same as Hebron in the land of Canaan. And Abraham came to mourn for Sarah, and to weep for her. And Abraham stood up from before his dead, and spake unto the sons of Heth, saying, I am a stranger and a sojourner with you. Give me a possession of a burying place with you, that I may bury my dead out of my sight. And the children of Heth answered Abraham, saying unto him, Hear us, my lord, thou art a mighty prince among us. In the choice of our sepulchres bury thy dead. None of us shall withhold from thee his sepulchre, but that thou mayest bury thy dead. And Abraham stood up and bowed himself to the people of the land, even to the children of Heth. And he communed with them, saying, If it be your mind that I should bury my dead out of my sight, hear me, and entreat for me to Ephron the son of Zohar, that he may give me the cave of Machpelah, which he hath, which is in the end of his field. For as much money as it is worth, he shall give it me for a possession of a burying place amongst you. And Ephron dwelt among the children of Heth. And Ephron the Hittite answered Abraham in the audience of the children of Heth, even of all that went in at the gate of his city, saying, Nay, my lord, hear me. The field give I thee, and the cave that is therein I give it thee. In the presence of the sons of my people give I it thee. Bury thy dead. And Abraham bowed down himself before the people of the land. And he spake unto Ephron in the audience of the people of the land, saying, But if thou wilt give it, I pray thee hear me. I will give thee money for the field. Take it of me, and I will bury my dead there. And Ephron answered Abraham, saying unto him, My lord, hearken unto me. The land is worth 400 shekels of silver. What is that betwixt me and thee? Bury therefore thy dead. And Abraham hearkened unto Ephron, and Abraham weighed to Ephron the silver, which he had named in the audience of the sons of Heth, 400 shekels of silver, current money with the merchant. And the field of Ephron, which was in Machpelah, which was before Mamre, the field and the cave which was therein, and all the trees that were in the field, that were in all the borders round about, were made sure unto Abraham for a possession in the presence of the children of Heth, before all that went in at the gate of his city. And after this, Abraham buried Sarah his wife in the cave of the field of Machpelah before Mamre, the same as Hebron in the land of Canaan. And the field and the cave that is therein were made sure unto Abraham for a possession of a burying place by the sons of Heth. Chapter 24. And Abraham was old and well stricken in age, and the Lord had blessed Abraham in all things. And Abraham said unto his eldest servant of his house that ruled over all that he had, Put, I pray thee, thy hand under my thigh, and I will make thee swear by the Lord, the God of heaven and the God of the earth, that thou shalt not take a wife unto my son of the daughters of the Canaanites among whom I dwell, but thou shalt go unto my country and to my kindred, and take a wife unto my son Isaac. And the servant said unto him, Peradventure the woman will not be willing to follow me unto this land. Must I needs bring thy son again unto the land from whence thou camest? And Abraham said unto him, Beware thou that thou bring not my son thither again. The Lord God of heaven, which took me from my father's house, and from the land of my kindred, and which spake unto me, and that sware unto me, saying, Unto thy seed will I give this land. He shall send his angel before thee, and thou shalt take a wife unto my son from thence. And if the woman will not be willing to follow thee, then thou shalt be clear from this my oath. Only bring not my son thither again. And the servant put his hand unto the thigh of Abraham his master, and sware to him concerning that matter. And the servant took 10 camels of the camels of his master, and departed, for all the goods of his master were in his hand. And he arose and went to Mesopotamia, unto the city of Nahor. And he made his camels to kneel down without the city by a well of water, at the time of the evening, even the time that women go out to draw water. And he said, O Lord God of my master Abraham, I pray thee, send me good speed this day, and show kindness unto my master Abraham. Behold, I stand here by the well of water, and the daughters of the men of the city come out to draw water. And let it come to pass, that the damsel to whom I shall say, Let down thy pitcher, I pray thee, that I may drink, and she shall say, Drink, and I will give thy camels drink also. Let the same be she that thou hast appointed for thy servant Isaac. And thereby shall I know that thou hast showed kindness unto my master. And it came to pass, before he had done speaking, that behold, Rebekah came out, who was born to Bethuel, son of Milcah, the wife of Nahor, Abraham's brother, with her pitcher upon her shoulder. And the damsel was very fair to look upon, a virgin, neither had any man known her. And she went down to the well, and filled her pitcher, and came up. And the servant ran to meet her, and said, Let me, I pray thee, drink a little water of thy pitcher. And she said, Drink, my lord. And she hasted and let down her pitcher upon her hand, and gave him drink. And when she had done giving him drink, she said, I will draw water for thy camels also, until they have done drinking. And she hasted, and emptied her pitcher into the trough, and ran again unto the well to draw water, and drew for all his camels. And the man, wondering at her, held his peace, to wit whether the Lord had made his journey prosperous or not. And it came to pass, as the camels had done drinking, that the man took a golden earring of half a shekel weight, and 2 bracelets for her hands of 10 shekels weight of gold, and said, Whose daughter art thou? Tell me, I pray thee. Is there room in thy father's house for us to lodge in? And she said unto him, I am the daughter of Bethuel, the son of Milcah, which she bare unto Nahor. She said moreover unto him, We have both straw and provender enough, and room to lodge in. And the man bowed down his head, and worshipped the Lord. And he said, Blessed be the Lord God of my master Abraham, who hath not left destitute my master of his mercy and his truth. I being in the way, the Lord led me to the house of my master's brethren. And the damsel ran and told them of her mother's house these things. And Rebekah had a brother, and his name was Laban. And Laban ran out unto the man unto the well. And it came to pass, when he saw the earring and bracelets upon his sister's hands, and when he heard the words of Rebekah his sister, saying, Thus spake the man unto me, that he came unto the man, and behold, he stood by the camels at the well. And he said, Come in, thou blessed of the Lord. Wherefore standest thou without? For I have prepared the house and room for the camels. And the man came into the house. And he ungirded his camels, and gave straw and provender for the camels, and water to wash his feet, and the men's feet that were with him. And there was set meat before him to eat. But he said, I will not eat until I have told mine errand. And he said, Speak on. And he said, I am Abraham's servant. And the Lord hath blessed my master greatly, and he has become great. And he hath given him flocks and herds, and silver and gold, and men servants, and maid servants, and camels, and asses. And Sarah, my master's wife, bare a son to my master when she was old, and unto him hath he given all that he hath. And my master made me swear, saying, Thou shalt not take a wife to my son of the daughters of the Canaanites, in whose land I dwell, but thou shalt go unto my father's house, and to my kindred, and take a wife unto my son. And I said unto my master, Peradventure the woman will not follow me. And he said unto me, The Lord before whom I walk will send his angel with thee, and prosper thy way. And thou shalt take a wife for my son of my kindred, and of my father's house. Then shalt thou be clear from this my oath, when thou comest to my kindred. And if they give not...
You want to do that. Let me see if I can get that. I don't think so. Why did I do that? I wanted to stop where, let me see if I, no. I wanted to stop where her father says to Rebecca, "Will you go?" And she says, "I will go." It's a powerful, powerful story. Now let me see if I can get you folk up on the screen here. So that's that. Not sure. Okay, this is, here you are. Pretty small, but there I can see. Okay. So I wondered what reactions you would have to this. Just sitting here, there, listening to the Bible being read in the King James Version. We have a few moments before we need to take the break. Any reactions one way or the other of any sort?
Who's that reading? Who is it reading the Bible?
His name is Alexander Scourby.
Oh, he has a beautiful voice.
He does. He sounds like an Englishman, doesn't he?
Yes.
Actually, he's an American.
Oh, he sounds like Richard Burton to me.
Yeah. He's of course deceased, but he was quite a performer with his voice in his time. Peter, let me get you the mic.
I would say wonderful rendition. When Scourby was reading every morning on KSGN, one chapter, my wife and I were listening very attentively to him. We enjoyed very much his reading. Now, in regard to the history of patriarchs, of course, there are today different opinions that they didn't exist and it was an invention and is not real. Well, a few years ago, I attended a workshop at Holiday Inn in Riverside. And one of the lectures was a professor from USC, I think. Hayden was his name. And he was talking about exactly in this way that the Jews were just creating a story to make themselves to look better than their neighbors. And I argue with him a little bit. I told him if they supposed to invent this story, they wouldn't come with a person like Jacob, that was a liar, a deceiver. I mean, he took his first birthright and all these things that he did. And I just argued with him a little bit. He was not very pleased, and I was very surprised to hear from him because he was a Jew. And he was teaching religion at USC. Now, in regard to the veracity of if it's historically correct or it was just a later creation, what pleads in favor of this are the Hebla tablets. In my view, they are a great proof that the history of the patriarchs is true. Because this discovery that was done by a team of Italian archaeologists, Mattias and his Pettinato, he was deciphering the tablets. In 1975, at Tel Mardik, a village in Syria, that was close to Hebla, the old name of the place. They were discovering amazingly, they were discovering first 1,500 tablets, in good condition, and later on weak. Later on, 1,600 tablets. And of course, in addition to the very well preserved tablets were fragments that they were still discovering there. Why is this Hebla tablet important? First of all, these tablets were in two languages, in Sumerian and in a Semitic dialect close to Akkadian. Why it's important? It's because these records are mainly economic records. They were including contracts about different transactions, but also names and places, but not only that, but also some tablets were talking about foreign relations, diplomatic relations. Among the names discovered there are Abraham in the tablets, also David, also Ishmael and Esau, and many others. Among the places that these tablets are talking about, amazingly, are the 5 cities on the plain that the chapter is talking. Also, name of a king was also in these tablets. And this proves that these tablets that are considering to originate about 2,500 years before Christ, they are close to reality. They are not inventions. These names are clear, present, and the names, including names of the city like Jerusalem and others, Haran, that these chapters are talking about, that was not very far from Hebron. They are real. And I'll stop here.
Well, Peter, I don't think anybody could handle the historical literature any more thoroughly. I myself find it odd to think that all of that was wholly contrived. It would take thousands of people over hundreds of years to create a story that they all believed, and it was false. I just on the face of it, without any of that detail that you gave, I just find that implausible. Now, there are things that probably grew up around the story, like there always has been the case, but the essential outline of the story, I think, is beyond question. But that's one set of questions. Another, though, is what other kinds of reactions do you have rather than, or in addition to historical ones? Yeah.
If I was Jewish and this was the beginning of my heritage as a race, I would, and I contrast it with the Japanese heritage that I have. You know, the Japanese have a rather glorious start. You know, they come from the sun and all kind of other kinds of stuff that sort of magnifies their origin. If I was Jewish, on the other hand, I would be very circumscript, and I would start with a very have a certain amount of humility, because I mean the story is pretty. I mean the founder of my thing had numerous flaws, and the whole existence of how my nation started was pretty shady, and you know, and so I can see God in His providence chose this so that the Jewish people would have a heritage where they would naturally be humble if they were to take their heritage, not like I was raised in Japan, where they have a glorious start, you know, in the samurai code and all that kind of stuff. I think God chose a very different way and quite the character of the kind of people He wanted to raise.
Well, I think you're right. Abraham turns out to be a sort of nomadic savage, does it? He's moving around, killing a lot of people, getting involved in all sorts of things. He's not quite the smooth character we see in the Russell Harlan pictures, right? He's a very coarse and yet a person of strong integrity. So I think for me, the passage where Abram says, should not the judge of all the universe do that which is right? I think that's one of the greatest lines in all of history, where you have a human being saying to God, you know, there are rules and even you have to obey them. And I think that's another view of God that portrays God able and willing to act in ways that are required of all of us, and does not rebuke Abraham for resisting God in that fashion. Where else in all of literature do you find a mere human being just standing up to the Creator and saying, no, 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 you may be God, but you can't do that? It's just, I think it's extraordinarily powerful. One last comment, then we'll quit.
You know, we talk about natural law. And it's interesting that you would come back and bring that up and point us to the fact that Abraham back then had a concept of what natural law was. And that I think the whole idea of right and wrong, I think, is sort of part of our genetic makeup, probably. That it can go back that far and probably even further back than that, to Cain and Abel.
You're right. Abraham didn't have a lot of courses in Immanuel Kant and John Stuart Mill, all those people. There's something deeply intuitive about the fundamental principles of the moral life, right? Even a youngster can tell when something's unfair going on. It's time for us to take break so that you folks want to go to church, maybe, but we'll continue talking as long as you want.
You asked the question about what others, situation was similar with this, where friend of God is standing up and asking God, you couldn't do this.
Right.
You would not have a good reputation if you do this amongst the rest of the people. You cannot kill them. You better kill me and save your name.
And there was Moses.
Moses.
Yeah. So Matthew Cortman has written this book, Saying No to God, as being well received around the circle, but it takes up this theme. But contrast that with another religion that emphasizes submission. Its very word, Islam, means to submit. When people of this persuasion worship, they kneel down. And it's a different kind of thing. Both sides, when the human beings stand up against the Creator in the Bible stories, but also the first thing any heavenly messenger says, stand up. Right? Stand up. When the messenger comes to an angel or something, comes to any human being, the human being's tendency is to bow down in fear and in respect and so forth. And every single time in the Bible, it says, stand up. Don't be afraid. God is not the one who wants you to bow. God is the one who wants you to stand up. So these are different paradigms, and each one has its strengths and weaknesses. But this really Jewish tendency to stand up, take account, and be willing to articulate what one believes is right. People need to go, so we'll pause here for. Feel free to leave anytime you want. Oh, 1 second, Judith, back to Judith.
Japanese genealogy.
Over
as
here.
deeply invested as Abraham certainly was in Isaac. He didn't argue with God when he was invited to go sacrifice his only son. He argued with God over the redemption of the Sodomites, but not his only son. He had the guts to tell God that he couldn't do something unjust. And from a very pagan background, where child sacrifice was a norm, he submitted. And I like to think that that wasn't just groveling because God was the Lord of the universe. And I noticed in the reading that he said to the servants, we will come back. So his connection to God, and maybe even his understanding of the plan of redemption, led him to have confidence that even if he did slay Isaac, he could be resurrected. And I think, maybe it's not just the submission, but the depth of his faith that I think, all the three Abrahamic religions worship.
Well, it's worth a lot, because that story, the binding of Isaac, gets such different readings and different cultures. Okay, Forrest, let's call it break time. Can you hear me?
I can, David. I can.
Okay, 10 minutes from now, let's reconvene. Is that all right?
All right, so that would be 11:43.
Oh,
Let's make it 11:45. Okay.
11:45, yeah.
And if I have one hand up already, so if you have others have questions, please raise your hand
Okay,
and we'll take you after the break. Thank you.
okay, very good. Thank you.
And I'm going to pause the recording right now.
Good.
Okay. All right, Simona.
Thank you. When I listened to this and when I read the text myself, I cannot stay away from this feeling that Abraham was really not a good person. He was a rich man, and yet he sent his firstborn son and his mother with a bottle of water. Every time later on when he's talking about Isaac, he's saying this is his only son. No, he's not. He already had Ishmael. And there is a whole laundry list of things: incest, lies, this cruelty to Hagar and Ishmael. So the question is, when we look through the standards of our time, he fails abysmally, I think. So if we are not supposed to judge Abraham by the standards of our time, why are we supposed or expected to judge others by the standards of Abraham's time? For example, attitude towards LGBTQ people. This is the Pride Month. So, where is the equal judgment going if we are accepting the same standards?
Okay. Yeah, and do you have an answer to, are those rhetorical questions to you? And do you?
But they are rhetorical. I think in his time, this was completely acceptable. It was normal. But in our time, it's terrible. I mean, I'm looking at all the stuff that he has done and said. I mean, he lied. Okay, so Sarah was his half sister. He married her. He lied twice when other men saw her as beautiful and wanted to take her as a concubine. And you can say, okay, the first time he was really, really scared somebody's going to kill him because she was beautiful, but God saved him from his own deceit. God intervened and he did it again years later. So he didn't really learn much from that behavior, right? But what I'm trying to say, there is clearly this, idea that certain things were acceptable at his time. He was a man who lived by the standards of his time. And I think there is a lesson there for us that, there are certain standards that are no longer acceptable. It is no longer acceptable to marry a half sister. And maybe we should move away from taking all the standards of that time and try to apply it to our time.
Okay, all right. Well, thank you. Thank you very much, Simona. I'll now go to Geo Bob. Bob?
How you doing, Forrest? Yeah,
I'm well, and you, sir?
good. Could I piggyback on what Simona is talking about?
I'll let you for $100. You can do it.
Okay. I can relate. First, a comment. Alexander Scourby, that was one of the groups of records that my parents had when I grew up as a kid. And on Sabbath, the one thing that we could listen to was to sit down and listen to him reading the Bible and telling stories. And so that voice and that reading just really brought back a lot of memories. Just wanted to say that. I'm sure there are others that remember listening to him. But anyway, back to Simona's comment. I think she's absolutely right that if we read these stories in the Bible, and you read them literally, instead of figuratively, you begin to be horrified by some of the things. Now, I worked many years among nomadic people, so I understand some of the background and so on. But I'm just wondering, and this is a question to the group, maybe to David as well, are there certain lessons that we can learn not only what to do, but what not to do, that can help, that come out of these ancient stories, that can lead us toward what are the proper values? Now, do we read this just figuratively as a beautiful reading, and we say, wow, isn't that pretty, and that's interesting? Or are we supposed to get lessons, and what are the lessons that you would take out of these stories that are really quite horrific in many ways? So just a broad question there.
Okay. Does David, you want to answer, give an answer or give a response to that? Or does someone else want to give a response?
I would like to get in the queue, yeah, but afterwards. But before we do that, let's acknowledge Rod Corker. He's on board, and thank you, Rodney. It's good to see you.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Thank you. I guess I'll put you in the queue, David.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. I mean, you're on.
Oh, I'm not. Well, I think we should take these stories in their raw offensiveness and not try to smooth over the rough edges and make Abraham a very attractive figure like he appears in the Russell Harlan paintings. This was a savage, nomadic chieftain. That's the kind of person we're talking about. And to sugarcoat that in any way, I think is not helpful. So when Bob talks about it being literal or figurative, that may be jumping into the question of how historical these records are. But my own view is that they have some basis in history, at least enough basis in history that we can talk about these stories. But how do these apply to us today? There would be some who would say they are so offensive that we should not attend to them. And I would say that that is true with respect to our children. I don't think we should tell these stories to our children, but I do think they are valuable to adults because they help us see where we have been. And they help us to plot the direction in which the story is moving. And from the time of Abraham, it has moved quite decidedly against human sacrifice, although that wasn't an easy triumph to have. And it's moved more decisively on behalf of the equality of women. What Lot does to his daughter is unspeakable. But we need to know that that story is in our background, and that it reminds us of where we have been and where we could so easily return. So the stories have a pedagogical value, but I would say their value is in helping plot the story. The Bible is a movie. That's an early part of the movie, and without it, we don't make sense of the whole movie.
Okay. All right. Thank you, David. I'll go to Dana now. Dana?
Oh, wow. I did not expect to be on so
Oh, you got
fast.
your hand up.
Yes, I did. I did. So to Simona, thank you so much for your perspective. It's really valuable. I mean, it's eye-opening for me the way you put it. You know, even though I had this feeling for a long time, but nobody really put it in this type of logic. If you want to condemn the people that the Genesis is condemning, if you think that's the way to live, then are you okay with living like Abraham? I like that. To Bob, I'm having a difficult time reading figuratively what appears to be a list of facts, a description of facts. If this would be a poem, it would be easier for me personally. So if anybody else has something to say to enlighten me on this or to help me, I would really appreciate. And then you mentioned that you lived for a long time among nomadic people.
Yeah,
And that helped you in the reading of the Bible. I would love to hear more of those stories. And I love all your pictures, and I envy the place you live. You make me sin every day when you put those pictures on Facebook because I envy you. Okay, this was for Bob.
okay.
Yeah.
You want to
So-
respond to that, Bob?
No, he knows that. He knows that. Yeah. So, and going back to Lot, I don't know. I don't know what to make of that story. I don't know if it's incest and abuse. I don't know who's the abuser and who's the victim
Okay,
in
Bob.
that story. I don't know if that's elder abuse or not.
Okay. All right. First of all, Bob, did you want to respond to that?
Yeah, very briefly. Thank you for those kind words about some of the places and pictures that I put on Facebook. But back to the, one of the lessons that I think I learned working among the nomadic peoples, I worked among nomadic Muslim peoples in West Africa along the edge of the Sahara Desert. And I went there as a fairly, had grown up in an Adventist home, Christian home, never worked among Muslims. And then I'm suddenly thrown in the midst of working with people that had 2, 3, and 4 wives. And then some of them were Muslim, others were animists that practiced some really strange things, animal sacrifice and other kinds of things. And but it was at first it was interesting to just be fixated on all the things that to me looked so horrible and terrible and inhuman and so on. But then when I got to know people individually, I found out that they were human just like I was. No, maybe I got corrupted. I don't know, David, you can, but I came to realize that a lot of the things that we fixate on that are terrible, that are different, in particularly across cultures and across religions, different worldviews, but underneath we are human. And I think if we can find that, and I think that's what I try to do when I read these stories in the Bible, what's the human element here? And that's what all I would like to say about it. See what some of the others have to say.
Did you want to return back to that, Dana? I see your hand back up again.
Maybe a little later. Thank you.
Okay, all right, good.
I just remember. I
Is
got
later now?
annoyed.
Is later now?
It's later now. Yeah, I just remember. I was thinking about Ishmael and what Simona said. The fact that he was denied his identity as firstborn, and how unfair was that, and how neglected he might and unloved he might have felt, and no wonder he became a rebellious person, and this conflict perpetuated for centuries. So I don't know if Dr. Cupino is here to tell us more about the effects of neglect and lack of love in childhood,
Yeah.
and how that can influence someone's life.
Okay,
And,
Dr. Capino is not with us today, so.
Okay, and then I don't know if you realize, but after sacrificing Isaac, Abraham lived at Beersheba in a different place than Sarah. And when she died, he came to the place where she lived to bury her. It seems like they kind of separated after that because she couldn't take it, him trying to kill her only son.
Okay, thank you. I see you, Anastasia, is looking to see if I had somebody else first. Okay, Anastasia, please.
Okay. Thank you very much. First of all, it's so memorable to me and so inspiring, Dr. Cork's session when he was here and we discussed the nature of God. And also Dr. Hayes' book on moral values of the New Testament. And he admonishes that we actually read and study the New Testament first and go backwards to the Old Testament. And so those things that are antithetical to Christ, how he lived, what he did, and what he preached, what he taught, then when they're so antithetical to the nature of God, is man's interpretation. Dr. Cork didn't say that, but we discussed God's nature and not God's. And that's my, that's really keeps my faith going because yes, God uses all kinds of people, but when we want to know the true nature of God, we have to look at Jesus. Thank you.
Okay, and you know, I used to have a sermon that said, why did God use imperfect people to do his will? And do you know what the answer is? That's the only kind he's got. So
that's a good one.
Yeah. So anyway, you know, I'd like to enter in here if I could. Whenever I think of these episodes here in Genesis, I go back to my early days in Sunday school where we had the flip charts, you know, where Joseph and his coat of many colors, and you had Adam and Eve, and you had the rainbow. You know, there's some of these stories that were read today would never make it on a children's Sunday school or Sabbath school picture scroll. I mean, these are a little weird. And I take the position that these are not real history stories, that these are legends based on some type of oral history or some fragment somewhere. These were probably written down after the exile. I do believe they have moral lessons for us in many ways. The one moral lesson that stands out to me is not from Abraham, but it's from Abimelech. Abimelech is there and he's been lied to, not only by Abraham, but by Sarah. And he's about to commit a grievous wrong. And he realizes now, and again, God speaks to him according to the story. And he just calls Abraham up short. And so Abraham has to confess his wrong, but he was carrying that thing around because you remember it says that he said when he left Ur that they had rehearsed their story. And anyway, so Abimelech really kind of stands out as a moral leader here. I think some of these other stories, these legends, I'm going to call them, are polemics against Israel's enemies. And so they like the two offspring of Lot's two daughters. They're really Israel's enemies. And so it's kind of puts them in a bad light. They were bastard children, and no wonder they're like that. So there's polemics. So anyway, again, and they remind me, and Anastasia kind of reminds me some of the Greek stories, the Greek myths, that there's never perfect people. Even the heroes have flaws. And I think in this stories here, even the heroes have flaws. And so anyway,
But
do
Forrest,
you know anything about Greek stories?
Forrest,
Yeah.
I was going to say, but that was the reason because Socrates stood up against those kinds of mythology, and for that they condemned him to death. And I have to say also, as an educator, God forbid that we teach those stories to children. And when we teach them, we have to teach them with the perspective, but we always have to condemn that unacceptable behavior.
Yeah.
Okay,
Okay,
thank you, Forrest.
Thank you. So anyway, these are very good legends that teach great moral stories and or other issues. So anyway, that's my story and I'm sticking to it. So I'm going to skip you a moment. Simona, we have Rod Corker. Rod, welcome back.
Thank you, Forrest. And David, I heard in the distance you acknowledged me joining today. And I thank you for that. I promised myself I would lay low and start slow. But Abraham is a character that certainly interests me, and I wish to learn more about him. So I'm going to make a couple of comments, and they might be repetitive because I joined late, and I confess I did not read the preliminary reading. But I just want to throw a couple of thoughts in here. Abraham, before he was Abraham, was Abram. Abram is an early Semitic name. It's a Sumer name. The Hebrew people, when they trace him through, believe that he was born in Nippur, which was the center of religious culture around 2000 BC, when Abraham existed. Remember, Abraham lived to be 179, 180 years old, and Sarah lived to be around 175 years old. And Abraham had bought the lot for Sarah well before she died in the area that we now know today as Hebron. The key, one of the key issues here is that the religious culture moved from Nippur at that time to a place called Ur. Ur is the mother tongue of the Semitic people, and it was the highest educated center. So what we have here is Abram, who was highly educated at that time, living in the religious culture at that time. His father and mother both were priests and priestesses within the god at that time, who was the earth god, known as Ir, but there could be other gods involved there. But he was brought up in the Enlilite culture. Enlil was the, and you can call this mythology, but it's well documented in museums around the world. He was the great god of Mesopotamia. And spent his last days in Jerusalem, living in Jerusalem. So, yes, he married a sister, but at that time, a half sister. But at that time, my understanding from Hebrew writings is that cousins were also called sisters. And we have to be careful thinking of a biological relationship. Even in the Adventist church today and Mormon churches, we call sister so-and-so, sister so-and-so. And that was very common even in Nebuchadnezzar's time. Part of that tribe, when the word sister or brother was used, it was used in the sense of a tribal relationship, not necessarily a biological relationship. So I think we have to be a little careful ratcheting that down too hard. But when he certainly lived in an enclave of relatives, when he was up north trading, I forget the name of that place, in that crossroads where he traded as in leather goods. He was a businessman, well educated. And then he was asked by God to move south. But which God, to me, which God asked him to move down to Beersheba, head south? Abraham, at that time, he was still Abraham, didn't hesitate. And I think he didn't hesitate because he thought it was a God that his parents worshipped that he grew up knowing. And he said, sure, I'll go down. Now, we as Adventists say, well, that's a great step of act of faith that he would follow an unknown God. At that time, I don't think he knew Yahweh or which God was talking to him, nor did his son or son. So God revealed himself slowly over time. But to cut this off short, I think what is very important is to recognize Abraham was a prominent figure. Ishmael's sons became chieftains in all the Moabites, Ammonites, and the provinces and nations that were around Israel. So who was God going to mobilize? That's my point. Abraham was a dominant figure in the South, well-educated, wise, respectful of God, and God chose him. What else happened at about 2000 BC is that the ancient gods, the Enlils, the Ears, the Shemashes, those other gods disappeared from the scene and junior God came on. There's a major change going on. But the other thing, and I've just got back from Egypt and listening to a Coptic Christian, and one of the key points that I picked up from his conversation was that the Egyptian god Ra-Amen, he made an endeavor around 2000 BC to be the God of the world, the God of the universe. Well, we know that our God, Yahweh God, is that he claimed to be God of the universe. I think at that time, and maybe some bad picks there, but the fact is, who else could he mobilize? It was Abraham. Who could mobilize the Canaanites? Who could mobilize and set up a new tribe of people that became known as the Israelites? And God was clearly challenged by Egypt at that time, saying, no, Amen-Ra is going to be the world and the dominant universal God. And remember, Egypt was dominant at that time. And God said, no, not enough. You're not going to be this person. That's not my team. They're not my guys. And he mobilized Abraham, warts and all, because he probably didn't have any other choices. So within that context of history, it makes much more sense to me. But maybe it only makes sense to me and nobody else. I'm prepared to accept that. But I think I agree with what David's comments initially were, and Simona's comments. You have to look at the time period, but you have to look at what was going on in other nations and what their gods were telling to their people. And I think God mobilized Abraham because he was his best shot. And remember, Abraham moved south with 36 retainers. He didn't go down by himself. He had people around him, half sisters and cousins and relatives, and he also had a camel cavalry. He participated in wars. He was able to head off other nations. So he was a chieftain with power. He was probably, I think, at that time, a pretty good choice for God to say, we're going to push back on the Egyptians or these other nations.
Thank you, Rodney.
You're
And
muted, Forrest.
yeah, thank you. Again, it's good to hear your voice, and you're doing well. Thank you. I want to, okay, I'll come back to Simona. Simona?
So maybe just, I'm basing the statement of being that Sarah was Abraham's half sister based on what he said, that they shared the father. So, but again, it seems that this was a norm of the time, and there was no prohibition at the time in the place where they lived. But one thing that I find interesting is probably just building on the fact that Abraham was a very flawed human being by any standard, even standards of his time, is that God accepted him just the way he was.
Yep.
And I think it's a very powerful message to all of us that, you know, how loving God truly is. You know, God is not trying to lecture Abraham. He is teaching him through his experiences, sometimes repeatedly, you know, sending the same message because he's making the same mistakes. But he is not cutting off Abraham from himself. Quite the contrary, he accepts him the way he is, with all his flaws, with everything that he's doing right and wrong. And he's using him in a way to show how much he loves human beings. And I think that's probably one of the most powerful messages that I get from these stories. The second thing I wanted to say is that, you know, one of my favorite characters actually is Abraham's servant, whom he has sent to find a wife for his son Ishaq, or Isaac. The name comes from ha, laughing. And so he is sending this man to Mission Impossible. He's sending him to find a wife, sight unseen, which was probably a common thing at the time. But he is in a situation that he has to choose a wife for his master, for his future master. And, you know, he is well aware how sensitive that mission is, and so he asks for help. And I really like that story. It's such a beautiful story about, you know, what test he has put for him, you know, before God. You know, this is what I want you to do. So he's not asking, well, can you show me a sign? No, he says, you know, this is what I want you to do. And he is choosing something that actually is meaning, because if somebody is going to water all the camels, and I'm telling you that's lots of work, that is the person you probably want to have on your side. So it's probably one of my favorite stories in this part of the Bible.
Okay, thank you. Just before Anastasia, I just I'll look and see if Dr. Taylor was on here. Anyway, you know, the question of only son, I think, there's the word yakid, which doesn't mean singular. It means the beloved, and it sets out one son above the other. So I'd have to ask someone more knowledgeable in that, but it seems like that was, you know, when it says that Jesus is the only begotten, it's that concept of Yakid. So anyway, now I'll come back to you, Anastasia.
Oh, thank you so much. And it's exactly the perspective, I agree with Simona, is when we don't take those individual things and by established religions or whatever, they make it as a behavior we need to emulate, but we give the perspective that Simona gave or you gave. And the same thing with the Greek, we learned a lot through Odysseus and Achilles and those wonderful, and the fact that the very wise writers, especially of the tragedies and the Odyssey, is that through their faults, we are learning. As long as we don't do what certain Athenians did, what they took the immoral rather than the moral, the sophist, in order to make money and exploit their students. And when Socrates stood up, of course, they wanted him to die. So the perspective is very important, because I don't believe in burning books, but looking at the perspective, at the history and the knowledge we get. And of course, my specialty is antiquity. So I thank you for your appreciation.
Thank you very much. I'm looking around here. No, I do see John Jones. Did you want to respond to these stories? And I don't want to put you in the spot, but you're more learned than many of us here. So
no. First of all, thank you for a fascinating presentation and discussion. This is interesting stuff, particularly, well, I think in some way for all of us. If it wasn't interesting to us, we shouldn't be bothering to try to decipher it, right? Well, just a quick thought or two, and I'll try to cut to the chase here. First of all, my field is New Testament studies, not old, but our struggle today is a little different from the issues and struggle of the people of long ago. They had their issues and struggles as well. We struggle with two levels. One, what is the moral aspect of a story? And that's fully appropriate. However, morality worked differently a few thousand years ago than it does today. I would say that when the ancients told, and these stories did have a long history of verbal recounting before they were written down, but when they told the stories and wrote them down, it was not a choice between a literal and what did we say, symbolic or sort of fantastic interpretation. It wasn't a choice at all. The wrongness in these stories is the humanness of them. To be human is to make bad decisions. That is a given. That of course they would say, yeah, right, Abraham should not have done this. Lot should not have done this. Lot's daughter should not have, there's plenty of that. But when they told the stories, the things that bother us the most were there, but secondary. When they told these stories, it was not for some kind of fairy tale fantasy, but it was rather for purposes that do not matter to us. This is the reasons for telling these stories are not our reasons. Their reasons had to do with possession of land, with questions of inheritance, tribal animosities, clashes between different national groups. Who owns the land? Why does Abraham have to buy this cave of Machpelah to be buried in? But the fact that he did and is buried there, his body's no longer, you can't see it there today when you visit it near Hebron. But those were the important considerations because they led to answers to the questions of who belongs where and why do we as Israelites think that this land under our feet belongs to us and so forth. I think it was those struggles that really motivated the stories. Further, one further quick little additional remark in passing here. For us, we say, well, we don't, of course we read these stories literally as history, because what's the alternative? Well, to treat them as fantasies. Well, that is a wrong-headed choice, it seems to me. We had a message from our newly re-elected world leader today, especially driving home that the only way to read these stories is as historical. That is their value. And he spent quite a long time beating that drum this morning in his now third inaugural presidential address. But it seems to me that when we drive that wedge between history and fantasy, it answers the question for us immediately. Oh, well, of course, that's got to be history. I mean, what does it mean to read these stories as fantasy? But the real option, it seems to me, in the ancients' mind, was not a choice between history and fantasy. They read them on a double level. Of course, if you press them, they would probably say, yeah, that's the way that happened. But the important thing is what it says about who we are, what is our relationship to Yahweh, how does he deal with us as humans, and why do we Why do we own the land where we own it? And why do we fight the other nations? Because our story tells us that God wants us to live in this particular place, whereas the Moabites or Ammonites, whoever, had their stories about why the gods gave that same land to them. So we've got here not a choice between two ways of reading, but three. And the one that means least to us probably may have been the one that was actually the most important to the ancients. Now, I do really particularly want to underscore the insight that Anastasia brought to us. Yes, it is in fact the case that God chooses these people for all of their faults, and your sermon title was exactly right, Forrest. But Paul uses those stories about Abraham precisely to make the point of salvation by grace through faith. From the Christian standpoint, it is precisely not because Abraham was such a wonderful and good and moral person, but God chose Abraham because God chose Abraham, period. And that's the New Testament takeaway lesson for it that Paul gives us in Romans. I've taken too many minutes to say all of this, Forrest, forgive me, but you pushed my buttons. So I suspect that these are the issues in context of Old and New Testament that we should be thinking about, rather than driving a wedge between strictly literal historicizing reading versus fantasy of some kind.
Okay, thank you very much, John. Appreciate it very much.
Quickly,
Before Anastasia, hold on. I've got Simona up here again, and then I'll come to you, and then I think we'll be getting close to the bewitching hour. So Simona, if you quickly. Okay, go ahead, Simona, go ahead. You're muted.
I said let Anastasia go first.
Oh, that's okay. That's okay, Simona.
Okay,
I'm-
so
I'm
because I want to
judging-
talk, I want to just add something different. So John was talking about morality. You know, there are two components to morality. One is the component of right and wrong that is inherent to all human beings. There was actually a study published this week that pre-verbal children as young as 8 months old can tell the difference between what is right and wrong. And the other component is cultural. These are cultural mores, you know, that are associated with the times and circumstances in which we grew up. So right or wrong for somebody who has been raised in Seventh-day Adventist Church may not be the same thing as for somebody who has been raised in, say, as an atheist or a Muslim or Hindu or anything like that. So you know, these two components are not, so the first component, right and wrong, on the level of humanity is the same for all of us. But these cultural elements are something that we need to consider when we are making our moral judgment.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. Now Anastasia, quickly.
Yes, really quickly. I kind of lost my train of thought, but I appreciate very much, yes, all of this. I want to say, because of culturally, of course, about the classical antiquity and the BC and Homer and all that. Some things we find out, at least I did in my studies of comparative literature and classicism, existentialism and Christianity, and was Greek, French, and English, we find a lot of those universal trends, at least in the Western civilization. And from the very beginning, even from many hundreds of years BC, before the 5th century BC, Homer, through his heroes and anti-heroes, we learned that the worst sin, as they call it, amartia in Greek, means the missing the target. And so in his wisdom, we see through all this, the causes and effects of missing the target and the wisdom and the faults. So there are universal trends and universal truths, I believe, and differences. And on that, our writers of the tragedies, and Socrates was right in that men, according to Sophocles, men in singular, and of course, women in that, are better than the Olympian gods, and they were. Thank you so much.
Thank you, thank you. And then I'm going to come to Rod Corcoran, and then I'm going to go to David. So David, be standing by. Rod, to you.
Yeah, just two quick thoughts, and they might have already been introduced. But one of the real takeaways for me is that God keeps his promises. God made a promise to Abraham, and Ishmael had 12 sons. They were all chieftains, owned a lot of property. They were blessed. And then there was Abraham, who became the father of the Israelites, the Hebrews. And so he kept his promise to his sons. And that promise went to his sons. And the other link that I want to mention is many Hebrew authors will create a DNA link between Abraham and Noah and the ancients of the Garden of Eden. And we don't know whether God was partial towards a DNA link, but certainly many Hebrew writers believe that he may well have been.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much. And again, glad to have you back on board.
And glad to be back.
And I'm going to turn now to David. David, you can conclude. And don't forget to make someone else a co-host to continue on the, you call it the what?
Is the digital potluck going to continue?
Yeah, you need to have someone else because unless you're going to stay on.
Okay, McKinley's here, so that will follow. So 2 announcements. One is that the digital foodless potluck continues under the leadership of McKinley after we've closed this down. And so you'll have a lot of fun there. Secondly, we will have a potluck here in the Centennial Complex on June 25. So if you can mark that date down on your calendars and plan ahead, think about what you might bring to the potluck, as well as your cheerful selves. We're going to have a good time. It's been a long time since we've been able to get together, and so this will be a special time. Thank you all for going along with me on this experiment. I'll check with Bronwyn to see what she thought about it all, and we'll respond from that. Okay, let's pray. Dear God, thank you for all of this. Thank you for the promise of faith and hope and love. Help us to remember that the faith, hope, and love that matters most is not ours, but yours. May that give us courage and cheerfulness as we face the next week. In Christ's name, amen.
Amen.
All right, I'm going to stop the recording and then, okay, let's see.